benefit of eating
That would be great.
So you are getting, actually, right now, note cards. And while the Assistant Secretary is speaking, if you want to write questions that you've got, we'll try to collect them. Just sort of hold them up. Somebody will come around and collect them, because when she's done, she's going to take questions, a few questions. So it is my very great privilege to introduce to you, for those of you who didn't meet her on the way in or haven't met her other times, our Assistant Secretary of Labor, Jane Oates. I'm going to tell you two things about Jane, real quick. None of them are totally private. One you're going to know as soon as she starts talking to you, and that is that she was born in Philadelphia. Jane has really strong, wonderful Philadelphia roots, which I'm sure she'll pepper into her remarks. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Jane for a long time, and we first got to know each other when she was on the Hill. And Jane said something to me that I'll never forget when she was working to pass, and as they got bipartisan, completely bipartisan passage of the Workforce Investment Act. She said, you know, she just knew how to work in the Senate. She's like, I go to the bar mitzvahs, I go to the kids' weddings, Jane
bring nice gifts.
Yeah, and worked across the aisle, and she says she's got a big D stamped on her, but this industry is the color of green. It's really about money and jobs, and she really gets that at kind of every level. And when there was a conversation in Washington about who was going to be the Assistant Secretary, the thing that I knew and what I said to my colleagues and friends is if there was anybody that was going to heal us after 8 really difficult years, and who was going to be able to bring us together around that, that was Jane Oates. And I am so proud to say that in just a really short period of time, what she's done in this industry is just tremendous. And because of her, we have all kinds of dollars in Philadelphia. We have 3 Pathway Out of Poverty grants. I mean, there's just all kinds of activity that all of you are involved in some way, shape, or form, and there is more to come. We have only just begun. And so with that, it's my privilege to introduce Assistant Secretary of Labor, Jane Oates.
I have 3 minutes.
I know that I'm a glutton for punishment if I let Carrington go in front of me. I asked him to go first. The next time I'm going to bring an egg timer. But really, Jill, I don't know where you went, but thank you for hosting this. Before I came here, you can tell I have been blessed by Henry, St. Henry. Cheryl had me at 1199. There's a blessing being born and raised and working in Philadelphia, is that I am the beneficiary of all the beauty of the good parts of this city. I was born on Yeoman Street, right at 17th and Girard, educated at Jesu. I learned about bar mitzvahs from the people in the stores on Ridge Avenue early on in life. So I stayed here for high school, went away for college. That's, I went to Massachusetts, all the beginning of all my problems. If I had just stayed here, to Temple or St. Joe's, I would have been so much better off. Instead, I went to Boston College, got in with the Boston Mafia, taught there. But my story is really simple. I followed greatness. I came back to Philadelphia. I followed my heart when I went to Boston. I fell in love with Boston College. My dad was an immigrant. My mom was an immigrant. Mom never worked. Dad dropped out in 8th grade. Unions were his difference. He was the president of Local 158 at the end of his career. Both of them are deceased right now, unless they're coming back today. I don't know. They might come back today from the dead if I keep talking about them. But I was a person who followed my heart. My dad said, you can go to college. You're a girl. I'm forward thinking. You could be a teacher or a nurse. It was 1971. He was pretty progressive. Went to Boston College because I had to go to a Catholic college because my dad was an Irish immigrant, and you couldn't go to a public college. So I went there. The first day moving in, this really nice guy was helping me move my stuff in, and my dad said, so son, where do you live? He said, I live here. He said, no, I know you live on campus. Where do you live? He said, I live in this dorm. He said, Jesus, Mary, Joseph, turn back. Can't boys and girls living together. I thought we were going to be in a Catholic college. But my time, at least I won't go there.
I was going to ask you how that worked out.
A lot of prayer. But I went to teach in Boston. I got to know Senator Kennedy there with doing a sit-in. But I came back to Philadelphia for 2 reasons. One, he needed somebody to work on the campaign in '80 for Kennedy for president, but also because Philadelphia had hired Constance Clayton, and I'm a teacher, and I couldn't wait to work for her. Not because she was the first woman, not because she was the first African American superintendent of schools in Philadelphia, but because she was a change agent. She was going to do things differently. Special ed teacher, she closed all the special ed centers and brought them into regular high schools, so kids didn't have to get on a bus for 2 hours because they had a learning disability or a physical handicap. So I left Philadelphia. I left the Philadelphia schools to go with the leader, Margaret Wong, who ran a research center at Temple and said, what you really need is a PhD. And you need to be an action researcher, and you need to learn about the rest of the country, and you're a wonderful 9th grade teacher, but you could be more. And I left Margaret Wong to go with Ted Kennedy. And then I left Ted Kennedy to go with John Corzine, who history will be kinder than the voters of New Jersey were. A wonderful leader who inherited a structural budget deficit and tried to fix it with grace and dignity, and he got smacked across the face by the people of New Jersey. I still am a homeowner in New Jersey. I love them, but. And then I left them to work for Barack Obama. I have to tell you, I am a lucky woman. I'm here to tell you that the president selected Hilda Solis, an immigrant woman from LA County who got a Profiles in Courage Award in 2000 because she knew how to organize and she wasn't afraid to do it. She organized migrant farm workers. She organized low-income people in East LA where she was from. She is unbelievable. She meets and exceeds every other person who I've followed in leadership. And I come to you today to say that 2 things, and then I want to change it into a little bit of a conversation, which is why you're getting cards. One is the stimulus was an incredibly brave thing to do. The president knows how to do math. Come on. He understands we're in a deficit. He understands that if he had not done this, just as Paul said, if we didn't start throwing things out there, he inherited TARP from the previous administration. He took it like a good guy. He took it because he understood that, yes, we had to make sure people had credit, not only that you and I had credit, but also that small businesses had credit. He knew we had to get our financial house in order. He did that, but then he was brave enough to say, if TARP was necessary, stimulus is necessary. Stimulus is necessary for states in the State Stabilization Fund. If it had not been for the State Stabilization Fund in the ARRA law, you would have seen massive layoffs of police, of firemen, of teachers, of state and city workers. We would have been in an unemployment situation. Paul can correct me during the Q&A, although I'll fight with him on it. We would have seen at least 15% unemployment, and maybe more. And we would have seen different folks affected in that unemployment. In many times, a state worker or a teacher or a cop or a fireman are married to people who worked in the sectors that were heavily impacted, like construction or manufacturing in some states outside of the area of Philadelphia. Pennsylvania, a lot of teachers are married to manufacturing guys in the center part of the state, or vice versa. A lot of teachers are married to manufacturing girls in the central part of the state. But what the recession had created required a multifaceted response, and the recovery was an important element of that. For us, it meant that we had $750 million to put out in competitive grants. For us to focus on green, an area where there's great growth, whether it's in utilities or whether it's in new companies like manufacturing turbines or doing simple things like weatherization, that through promising methods like apprenticeship programs will lead folks, young people of color, women, into trades that will be vacated by a graying construction force. Construction is going to come back. We are going to build again. There's no question. It's just that, thankfully, because of organized labor, they're able to keep the brothers and sisters together and still alive while we're waiting for it to come back. Unemployment does a little bit, but the wraparound of having your health insurance and your support services by the brotherhood of unions has been able to keep those folks from jumping off a bridge. I'll be very honest with you, wherever you go around the country. And we have to focus, and we tried to focus our grants on the people that Paul alluded to a couple times, those young people.